Hey guys, Mrs. Karaz here. Today we're looking at the last section in Chapter 18. This is Section 5, Education and Culture. Alright, so starting with compulsory education. So when education is compulsory, the government requires that all children must attend school until a certain age. And originally, we saw back in 7th grade, public education was not mandatory. You did not have to attend school. But that changed, right? And we have laws in place saying that you must go to school. And public schools had to be built in order to meet this new mandate. And that was particularly problematic in the South. We looked at, again, I think last year, how, since farms were so spread out in the South, often it would be hard to have school buildings. There's a lot of private tutoring. Sometimes students would go to a teacher's house, but actual public school buildings were rather new. So by 1918, all states had compulsory education. Obviously, we have compulsory education today, right? You're required to go to school in New York State until you're, I believe, 16 is the age. So that is something that endures through today. So when we were talking compulsory education, we started with elementary school, right? The typical day ran from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and students would study the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Yes, education is a beautiful thing. McGuffey's Eclectic Readers were the most common textbooks, and students often learned through memorization and recitation. It was very, I give you information, you repeat it back to me. And in the early days, religion was taught in public schools, which is very different than what we have today, where we think there should really be a big separation between church and state, right? Educational opportunities for adults existed, but were a little bit, were on a much smaller scale than they are today. So there were a lot of public libraries that developed around this time. Andrew Carnegie sponsored several. Adult education classes were formed by churches and then expanded to the public beyond just the people who were members of those congregations. So there were ways to educate yourself without necessarily going to college or enrolling in school. You could find other ways to broaden your horizons, mentally speaking. And compulsory education is really important at this time because thanks to compulsory education, a larger portion of the population became literate and took an active interest in reading, right? Once you know how to read, well, maybe you had the opportunity to enjoy it. And some of the best-selling books at the time were dime novels, which were cheap paperbacks that told thrilling stories, often about the Wild West, right? I know we looked at leisure time previously in this chapter, so you want to use your time for you. You want to be able to relax, enjoy yourself, and dime novels were relatively simple, enjoyable reads. So one literary style that becomes very popular at this time is realism. And realism is a style of art that presents life as it actually is, without over-stylizing or romanticizing things, right? We're not saying that everything is beautiful and wonderful and rainbows and sunshine. We're showing the truth. So some popular realists that we'll take a look at. Stephen Crane showed the hardships of slum life in Maggie, a Girl of the Streets. Jack London wrote about miners and sailors who risked their lives in tough jobs. The Call of the Wild is one of his most enduring works, and fun fact, it is referenced in both The Outsiders and Nothing But the Truth. Kate Chopin told of an unhappily married woman in The Awakening. And Paul Laurence Dunbar was a poet who discussed what life was like as a black man. And he was one of the first successful full-time African-American writers. He was able to make his living through writing, which is definitely important. The most important realist, though, that we're going to spend a little extra time looking at is Mr. Mark Twain. His real name was Samuel Clemens, but he wrote under the pen name Mark Twain. And Twain was a realist who captured the speech patterns or dialects of Southerners. One of his most popular books, he wrote Tom Sawyer, which some of you may have read. He also wrote Huckleberry Finn, which was set in pre-Civil War South. The story tells about how Huck, an uneducated white boy, and Jim, an escaped slave, become friends. And Huckleberry Finn is widely considered to be one of the most important works in American literature, if not the great American novel, right? The best book that's ever been written and most accurately captures life here in America. Alright, so we also get at this time a newspaper boom. It's not just in literature. We have some nonfiction becoming more popular. And in part, the newspaper boom was caused by increased literacy, right? If more people can read, more people will want to read their news. It was also caused by urbanization, right? We have a faster moving pace of city life, which means people don't have much time to sit down and discuss the news face to face. There's more hustle and bustle going on. So I could read the paper while I'm on the subway, let's say, and I could get my news quickly as I want it. So at this time, mass circulation newspapers, or papers that have a large variety of readers, developed, and we're going to look at one in particular. Here it is. So the man in charge here is Joseph Pulitzer. If he sounds familiar, he should. The Pulitzer Prize was named for him, and the Pulitzer Prize is considered one of the most prestigious awards that you could win in literature here in America. So Pulitzer bought the New York World in 1883, and the New York World was a struggling newspaper at the time. He wanted to turn things around, so here are 3 things he did. 1, he cut the price so that more people could afford it, right? I'm going to not charge too much money for this paper. Number 2, he added some color comics that would entice people to, pick up the paper and read it. And number 3, he wrote sensational headlines about crime and scandal that were designed to catch his readers' attention. And this style of reporting that allows outrageous things to be published in order to boost readership is called yellow journalism. And it got that name for the Yellow Kid, which was one of Pulitzer's cartoon characters. So this style was very closely associated with Pulitzer himself. You wouldn't necessarily, it might be wrong to call this yellow journalism today, but this is the type of thing we're talking about, right? An NBA player gets busted in a DWI incident, and the headline reads "Slam Drunk." It's a play on words. It's sensational. It's a big thing, right? The power authority is in trouble. Abuse of power. It's punny. It catches your eye. It gets your attention, and maybe you're more likely to pick up the paper and read it. That is it for today, and that is it for Chapter 18. We will have a test soon, and we'll talk about all this more in class. Have a great night, guys.